Hey guys, tonight, we drift toward the edge of the world, to a place where the sea hums softly beneath the fog, and time itself forgets to move. Take a deep breath. Let the sound of the waves carry you far away, into a story hidden beneath the mist, the story of the whispering shore. The fog rolled over the coastline like a slow tide of gray smoke, curling around jagged rocks and broken piers. The sea whispered softly, not like a voice, but like the memory of one, a low hum buried beneath the wind. The air smelled of salt, rust, and something faintly sweet, old wood and forgotten prayers. Elias arrived just as the sun vanished. He had been driving for hours along a narrow coastal road that no longer appeared on modern maps. The sign that marked the village was so faded that only a few letters remained, Raven, something. He stopped the car and listened. Even the ocean sounded distant, muffled by the fog. He was a writer, or at least, that's what he told himself. He had come to collect stories from the edges of the world, the kind that people forget, the kind that never make it into books. This time, the legend was about an old man who talked to the sea. Locals said he sat by the water every evening, whispering to it, and sometimes the sea whispered back. When Elias reached the village, he noticed how silent it was. Not dead, exactly, but held. Every house had its curtains drawn. Faint yellow light leaked through cracks in the shutters. He saw no one on the streets, not even stray cats, not even the sound of a door closing. Only the sea, moving and breathing somewhere beyond the fog. He found a small inn by the harbor, if you could call it that. The woman at the counter looked like she hadn't smiled in decades. "Room for one?" Elias asked, forcing warmth into his voice. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on his coat, dripping sea mist onto her wooden floor. "You won't stay long," she murmured. "I'm just here to write," he said. "A few days, maybe." Her eyes flicked toward the window. The fog doesn't like visitors. When he asked about the old man by the shore, her hand froze midair, holding a rusted room key. "You mean him?" she whispered. "Who is he?" She didn't answer. She just pushed the key across the counter and said, "Don't go near the cliffs after dark." That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The inn creaked as if it were breathing, expanding and contracting with the tide. He opened the window. Cold air drifted in, thick and heavy with the scent of brine. Somewhere beyond the fog, he could hear it, the sea, whispering again. He pulled on his coat and stepped outside. The village was washed in gray light, neither night nor morning. The lamps had burned out, and the path to the shore was barely visible. He followed the sound, slow waves, soft murmurs, and something like a voice between them. At the edge of the cliffs, he saw him. An old man sat on a wooden stool facing the sea. His back was bent, his coat torn, and a small lantern flickered beside him, a weak, trembling glow in the mist. He didn't move when Elias approached. He just kept staring at the horizon, where the sky and ocean merged into one endless gray. Elias hesitated, then spoke softly. "Sir, are you the one they call the Whisperer?" The old man turned, his eyes pale and reflective, like the moon had taken residence behind them. "That's what they say." His voice was dry but strangely steady. "But the truth is, the sea doesn't need me to whisper. It remembers everything." Elias stepped closer. "What do you mean?" The man smiled faintly. "You can hear it, can't you? Beneath the waves, the ones it took." A chill ran through Elias. "The ones it took?" The old man nodded. "Every life the sea has swallowed. Every ship, every name, every promise. It keeps them. It hums their memory. But sometimes," he paused, his gaze distant, "sometimes it gives one back." The wind picked up and the fog thickened, wrapping around them like damp silk. Elias's heart beat faster. "Who are you waiting for?" he asked. The man didn't answer. Instead, he lifted a small, glass bottle from the ground, half buried in sand. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and wet. "She sent this," he whispered, before she went under. The lantern flickered once, then went out. For a moment, there was only darkness, the kind that feels alive. Then, faintly, Elias heard something beneath the waves, a woman's voice, calling a name he couldn't understand. When the fog cleared for a heartbeat, he saw her, A silhouette in the water, long hair flowing like seaweed, eyes glinting pale silver. She looked neither alive nor gone, just waiting. Elias blinked, and she was gone. The old man was staring into the surf, whispering something under his breath. "She still thinks I can hear her," he said quietly. "After all these years." Elias wanted to ask more, but his throat tightened. The air had changed, heavier, colder. The waves seemed to rise higher with each whisper. Somewhere deep below, something moved. Something vast. "Why do you stay here?" Elias finally asked. The old man's lips curved into a sad smile. "Because she's not gone. Not yet. The sea never truly lets go. It just waits for an exchange." A shiver rippled through Elias's spine. An exchange? The man looked at him now, and in that fog-dim light, Elias saw his eyes glisten, not with tears, but with reflection, like water. "The sea gives back one soul," he murmured, "and takes another." The tide surged suddenly, crashing against the rocks, soaking Elias's boots. He stumbled backward, heart pounding. When he looked up again, the old man was gone. Only the stool remained, empty, wet, facing the endless gray sea. He searched the shore, calling out, but the fog swallowed his voice. The only answer was the whisper of waves against stone. When Elias returned to the inn, dawn was breaking faintly behind the mist. The innkeeper was waiting by the door. "You saw him, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Elias hesitated. "Yes, but he vanished." She nodded slowly. "He always does, when someone else arrives." "What do you mean?" Her eyes darkened. "Every few years, someone comes asking about the old man. They always meet him. They always hear the sea whisper. And then," she didn't finish. She just turned away and whispered, "You shouldn't have gone to the shore." That night, Elias dreamed of the sea again. But this time, he was sitting where the old man had been. The fog curled around him, the lantern flickered, and in the water below, a pale face watched him from beneath the waves. When he woke, his hands smelled of salt and iron. Outside his window, the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. Somewhere beyond it, the ocean whispered, and for the first time, it sounded like it was saying his name. The fog lingered long after dawn, clinging to the cliffs like wet silk, curling into every crevice of the jagged rocks below. Elias walked along the shoreline again, drawn by a pull he could not name, his boots sinking slightly into the damp sand with each step. The sea hummed in quiet rhythm, its whispers now sharper, almost insistently melodic, as if calling him by name. He remembered the old man, the glass bottle, and the folded paper inside. Elias had left it in his coat pocket, trembling slightly as he held it now. The bottle was no longer cold. The salt and moisture from the waves had somehow seeped into the glass, leaving tiny streaks, like veins of fog trapped inside. With cautious hands, he pulled out the letter. The paper was brittle, yellowed, edges softened by water, and the ink faint but still legible. He unfolded it carefully. The writing was hurried, almost desperate. "If you read this, it means you have reached the edge of the world where I am lost. The sea remembers me, always. It will not let me rest until another listens. Beware the tide, and the one who waits beneath it." Elias felt a chill seep through his body. He knew the handwriting wasn't the old man's. It was younger, more elegant, feminine. His eyes traced the letters again and again, and with each reading, a strange unease settled into his chest, heavier than the fog, heavier than the sound of the waves. He looked up from the letter. The cliffs seemed taller, the waves darker, and the fog thicker. The shoreline stretched farther than it should have, twisting unnaturally in both directions. Something had changed overnight, or perhaps he had never truly seen it. The bottle rolled slightly in the sand at his feet. Elias bent down to pick it up, but the moment he touched it, a ripple ran through the water, soft at first, then swelling, like a pulse, like the heartbeat of the sea itself. For a moment, the horizon blurred, the line where sea met sky shimmering and shifting as though the world itself were bending. From the water, faintly, he thought he heard it again, a soft, melodic sigh, half laughter, half mourning. He froze, every instinct screaming that it was impossible. And yet there it was. "Who's there?" he whispered, his voice swallowed immediately by the fog. Only the waves answered, but they sounded different now. Familiar. Waiting. Elias decided to follow the shoreline. He had no map, no plan, but something in the letter, something in the urgency of the words, urged him forward. With each step, the beach seemed longer, the cliffs higher, and the fog more insistent. The sound of the sea pulsed in his ears, not just waves anymore, but whispers, faint words, almost like a conversation he was only barely able to understand. Halfway along the cove, he spotted something, a set of footprints, wet and distinct, leading toward a collapsed pier that leaned precariously over the water. Elias's heartbeat quickened. The footprints were too small to belong to the old man, and too light to belong to anyone else he might expect to see. He followed them carefully. The boards of the pier creaked underfoot, groaning like an old beast. The fog thickened even further, limiting his vision to only a few feet ahead. Then he saw it. Another bottle, lying half submerged at the edge of the pier. This one was darker, heavier, and when he picked it up, the water dripped off it like tiny icicles. Inside was another folded letter, almost identical to the first, but written in the same flowing, elegant handwriting. Do not follow me too closely. The sea does not forgive curiosity. I am bound here, yet I am free, and freedom comes at a price. Only one who is ready may hear the song beneath the waves. The words resonated with him, and a strange vertigo overcame him. It was not fear exactly, more like an invitation or a warning. He could feel something pulling at the edge of his mind, a subtle insistence that he was no longer merely observing, but becoming part of the story itself. The wind shifted suddenly, and a faint shape appeared beyond the pier. Elias squinted. It was the old man again, or was it? The man's posture seemed different this time, tense, alert. He held a lantern now, its flame flickering violently in the fog, though there was no wind. You shouldn't have come here, the old man said softly. His voice carried across the water, calm but imbued with an unsettling authority. The sea doesn't like strangers who touch what should be left alone. Elias swallowed hard. I found her letters. The one in the bottle. I didn't. You have already begun, the old man interrupted, almost kindly. That alone is enough. Now the sea is aware. The tide will notice you. Elias's mind spun. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the old man's presence seemed to anchor him in place. Every sound of the waves echoed in his chest like a drumbeat, and he realized that with every step he had taken along the shore, he had been moving closer to something inevitable. The old man gestured to the horizon, and Elias's eyes followed. There, just beyond the surf, a pale figure moved through the mist. At first, it seemed only a shadow. Then, a woman emerged, dripping with seawater, hair floating like ink in the gray morning light. Her eyes shone faintly, reflecting the lantern's flame, and for a heartbeat, Elias felt his heart stall entirely. She waits, the old man whispered, more to himself than to Elias. She waits for the one who can hear the sea. Elias tried to speak, but no words formed. The woman's gaze seemed to pierce through the fog, settling directly on him. He felt something deep inside shift, as if the very tide had tugged at his soul. The letter trembled in his hands. For the first time, he noticed something he hadn't before. Faint marks along the edges of the paper, as if the water itself had left messages, symbols he could not understand but recognized in a way that made his chest tighten. The old man stepped closer, voice soft, almost hypnotic. Some stories are not meant to be read, he said. Some letters are not meant to be found. But once the sea notices you, you are part of its song, part of its waiting, part of its endless tide. Elias's gaze returned to the water. The woman began to fade, disappearing back into the mist as suddenly as she had appeared. And yet, her presence lingered, in the hum of the waves, in the taste of salt on his tongue, in the thrum of the fog pressing against his skin. The old man placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. If you follow further, you will hear her fully, he said. And once you do, there is no turning back. You will carry her story inside you, just as I do. Elias nodded slowly, every instinct warning him to step back, to leave the letters and the tide behind. But curiosity, and something darker, more magnetic, kept him rooted. He knew that by morning, by the next high tide, he would have to return. He did not yet understand that the sea had already chosen him, and that some stories are not told. They are lived. The fog had grown heavier by the time Elias returned to the cliffs. It rolled in waves of gray that clung to his coat and hair, pressing against his skin with a damp insistence. Every sound seemed muffled, distorted, as if the world beyond the mist no longer existed. Only the sea remained, whispering, breathing, alive. He clutched the letters tighter. The paper had begun to wrinkle, almost as if it were responding to the presence of the fog, the tide, or perhaps something far older and deeper beneath the waves. The ocean called to him in a way that went beyond curiosity. It was a voice in his chest, in the rhythm of his heartbeat, a silent summons he could not ignore. And then he saw her. Through the swirling gray mist, a pale figure moved, barely more than a shadow. At first, Elias thought it was a trick of the fog, a reflection of the lanterns, or the waves' foam curling strangely. But as he stepped closer, the figure solidified. She was there, standing at the edge of the rocks, hair wet and dark, clinging to her face like ink and water. Her eyes glowed faintly, silver, reflective, alive with some memory he could not yet understand. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice trembling in the thick, heavy air. She didn't answer. She only raised a hand slowly, beckoning him, not with urgency, but with inevitability. The fog seemed to ripple around her, parting and folding back in strange rhythms, as though she moved not only through space, but also through something older, deeper than time itself. Elias followed, each step careful, hesitant. The cliffs seemed to twist unnaturally, stretching further into the fog than they had any right to. The old man's warnings echoed faintly in his mind. Once the sea notices you, you are part of its song, part of its waiting, part of its endless tide. As he drew closer, Elias felt something brush against his mind, a whisper, not of words but of memory. He stumbled, pressing his palms to his temples. The fog around him thickened and swirled, and suddenly he saw it. Visions, fleeting and sharp, like lightning behind his eyes. A young woman, laughing softly on the beach, hair sunlit and golden, standing beside a sailor whose uniform gleamed in the sunlight. They ran along the edge of the waves, hand in hand, unaware of the storm clouds gathering overhead. A promise was made, a vow whispered into the salt-laden wind. Then, darkness. Waves crashing violently, the sailor swept away, struggling against the pull of the sea. The young woman calling his name, her hands reaching out, fingers trembling. And finally, the quiet despair of the shore, empty, silent, fog rolling in to cover all traces. Elias staggered back, his knees weak. The visions receded, but the feeling remained, a hollow ache in his chest, as if the sea itself had reached inside him, dragging a memory not his own. The woman beneath the fog was closer now, her expression unreadable. Her silver eyes seemed to pierce through him, and yet there was no threat, only patience. She extended a hand, and the fog swirled around it like water, curling upward, coiling, alive. "You hear it, don't you?" she said, voice soft and melodic, echoing faintly as if the sea itself had spoken. "The whispers, the tide, the waiting. I don't understand," Elias admitted. His throat felt dry, his words fragile in the mist. "The sea remembers everything," she continued, stepping slightly closer, her figure blending with the fog. "Every promise, every loss, every life it takes, and every life it lets linger." Elias shivered. "And you?" Her gaze softened. "I am what remains of those promises. What remains of those who waited and were taken. I am bound to the tide, and yet I am free. Only when someone else hears the song beneath the waves." The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of wet sand and something faintly floral. Elias realized he could hear the letters whispering now, faint words etched by memory and salt. The first letter spoke of waiting, the second of warning, and now, this presence, The woman beneath the fog was a living continuation of both. I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, voice barely above the soft sigh of the sea. "You don't get to choose," she replied, almost kindly, almost sadly. "The sea chooses for you. It notices you, and it follows you, and soon it will be inside you, a tide you cannot resist." Elias's heart raced. He felt the pull, subtle at first, then stronger, a tug in his chest, in his bones, as if the waves themselves were reaching out to claim him. He wanted to run, to step back, but his feet felt heavy. The fog pressed against him from all sides, the whispers curling into his mind like smoke. And then she vanished. Just like that, in a swirl of fog and silver light, she disappeared. Only the sound of the waves remained, louder now, insistent, almost conversational. Elias fell to his knees on the wet rocks, the letters trembling in his hands. He understood then. The old man's warnings were not simply for caution. The sea had already chosen him. He would never be the same. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time no longer felt linear. Elias wandered the cliffs, the fog rolling endlessly, searching for a glimpse of her again. And sometimes, when he paused and listened closely, he thought he heard the soft echo of laughter or the faint sound of someone calling his name from beneath the waves. The old man's voice returned in memory, distant but clear. Some stories are not meant to be read. Some letters are not meant to be found. But once the sea notices you, you are part of its song, part of its waiting, part of its endless tide. Elias understood the weight of it now. He had glimpsed the past, the life of a woman bound to the sea, and felt its pull tugging at his own soul. She was neither ghost nor fully alive, but something in between, tethered by grief, promises, and an eternal tide. The waves whispered louder. The fog thickened, curling around him, almost like hands. And somewhere beneath it, he knew she waited. The fog had settled thicker than ever. It moved like liquid, curling across the cliffs and pooling in the hollows, swallowing the world in gray. Elias walked along the shoreline with the letters clutched tightly in his hands, each step heavier than the last. The tide whispered to him now, not gently, but insistently, as if urging him forward, towards something he could not yet name. At first, it was subtle. The water lapping against the rocks seemed to echo the cadence of the letter's words. Then, unmistakably, the tide began to carry a melody, soft, melodic, and impossibly human. A song that tugged at his chest, at his thoughts, at the very rhythm of his heartbeat. He froze. The melody was faint at first, drowned by the roar of waves, but gradually it grew clearer. It was the woman, the same pale, silver-eyed figure he had glimpsed beneath the fog. She was singing, or perhaps the sea itself was singing for her. Every note seemed to resonate inside him, pulling him closer to the water's edge. The cliffs twisted again beneath his gaze. They no longer resembled anything natural. Spiraling rock faces, sharp angles softened by fog, and shadows that moved against the flow of the wind. The letters in his hands vibrated softly, as if alive, as if responding to the tide's song. Elias felt his own pulse sink to the rhythm of the waves. He stumbled, nearly falling to the wet sand. The melody grew stronger, and with it, images flared behind his eyes. The woman's life unfolded before him. Memories not his own, yet searingly real. A young girl, golden-haired and laughing, running barefoot along the shoreline. A soldier, dark-eyed and earnest, kneeling to press a ring into her hand. Promises whispered, hearts entwined, the scent of salt and flowers mingling in the air. Then the storm, a sudden, black tide rising, swallowing the pier. The sailor, the girl. Her screams echoed in his mind, mingled with the cries of seagulls and the violent crash of waves. The fog pressed against him from all sides, thickening, twisting, alive. He gasped, clutching his chest, feeling the cold intrusion of the sea creeping into his bones. He realized that this was no mere memory. It was a warning, a calling. The woman's sorrow, her waiting, her endless tether to the tide, was reaching into him. Elias looked up. The fog shifted, revealing her again. She stood at the edge of the surf, hair wet and dark, eyes silver, face calm yet impossibly sad. She raised a hand, beckoning him closer. The tide moved with her, curling around her ankles like a living cloak. "You hear it now," she said, voice soft, echoing faintly as though sung through the waves themselves. "The tide remembers everything, and it has begun to remember you." I don't understand," Elias said, voice trembling. "Why me?" The woman's gaze pierced him, but there was no malice, only inevitability. "Because you came," she whispered. "Because you listened. Because you sought the story. The tide chooses who will hear, who will carry it forward. And now it has chosen you." Elias felt a chill climb his spine. He wanted to step back, to flee the cliffs, to escape the pull of the tide. But his feet felt rooted to the sand. Every whisper of the waves, every subtle vibration in the letters, every soft glow in the fog was drawing him forward. The letters trembled in his hands, flickering as if alive. He unfolded them again, reading the words he had memorized, and they seemed to rearrange themselves. Lines shifted, phrases appeared that had not been there before. "Do not resist. You are part of the tide now. You will see her past, and it will become yours. You will wait, and you will remember in one day." Elias's chest tightened. He could hear the song more clearly now, the melody of longing, grief, and eternal waiting curling into his mind. The tide rose, gently at first, then more insistently, lapping at his boots. He glanced down and saw not only water, but shadows moving beneath the surface, shapes of faces, of hands, of stories submerged yet pressing upward. He realized then that the tide was not just the sea. It was memory, it was grief, it was the unbroken chain of waiting that bound the woman and the old man, and now, perhaps him. She stepped closer, and the tide mirrored her movement. Every wave seemed alive, responding to her, curling around Elias without touching him directly. Yet he felt it, the pull of something ancient and patient, the weight of sorrow and longing pressing against his ribs. "You will begin to see what I saw," she said softly. "The tide carries memory. It carries me, and soon it will carry you." Elias wanted to ask more. How? Why? What would happen? But before he could speak, the fog thickened further, swallowing the cliffs, the pier, the sand, and the faint glow of lanterns he thought he remembered from the inn. The tide's song grew louder, and he felt his heartbeat sinking to it. Images surged again, flashes of the woman's life, moments of love and loss, her promises, her despair. And now, he felt himself inside them, tasting the salt, feeling the cold, hearing the wind and waves as if they were his own memories. The realization struck him like a sudden, cold wave. The sea's memory was infectious. To hear it fully, he must live it. He must carry it. He must become part of the tide's endless echo. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed. Time no longer had meaning. The fog and the tide became one. The woman's song threaded through his mind, threading him into her story, threading him into the old man's vigil, threading him into the whispers of the sea itself. And then, silence. The tide receded slightly, revealing the shoreline as if nothing had happened. The fog thinned, and the woman had vanished. Elias knelt in the sand, exhausted, the letters slipping from his hands, damp and heavy. He tasted salt, sweat, and something deeper, a lingering essence of waiting. The old man appeared behind him suddenly, moving without a sound. "You've heard it," he said. "The tide has begun to echo in you. Soon, you will not need the letters. Soon, the sea itself will teach you everything." Elias looked up, realizing the truth. He was no longer merely an observer. He was part of the story, tethered to the shore, to the fog, to the woman beneath the waves, and to the tide that never forgot. Elias could no longer tell how long he had been in the village. The fog erased days as easily as the tide erased footprints. He still woke to the sound of the sea each morning, but the rhythm of it had changed. It no longer came from outside the window. It echoed inside his chest. He stayed in the same wooden room above the silent inn, where the wallpaper peeled in waves and the single mirror hung crooked beside the bed. Each night, that mirror caught the faint shimmer of moonlight through the fog, and each night, It seemed to breathe with him. At first, it was only a trick of light, a shimmer, a movement. But lately, when he blinked, he saw things that weren't his. The reflection of a woman's hands brushing her hair, of eyes watching from the darkness, of candlelight flickering across skin pale as wax. He stopped trusting what was real. One night, he lit a candle and placed it beside the mirror. The flame trembled. Its light broke into ripples across the glass, and something behind that surface moved. The reflection of the room stretched wider, deeper, as if the mirror were no longer glass but water. And then, her, the woman, the same face he had seen in the fog, the same silver eyes. She was standing in the reflection, not outside the window, not in the inn, inside the mirror itself. Her hair floated as though underwater. Her lips moved, but her voice came through as a whisper beneath the sound of waves. "Do you see me now, Elias?" He froze. The candle flickered once, twice, and the air turned colder. He could see his own breath curling upward, meeting the faint shimmer of fog leaking from the mirror's edges. "You've heard the tide," she whispered again. "Now you must remember it." He wanted to speak, to ask who she truly was, why she haunted him, but the words never came. His throat felt full of salt and silence. The woman lifted her hand, pressing her palm against the inside of the glass. He stared at it, at the outline of her fingers, before slowly raising his own. When his palm met the mirror, the glass felt soft, alive. The surface rippled like water under his touch. Suddenly, he was somewhere else. The inn dissolved. The floor beneath him became wet sand, stretching endlessly in all directions. A storm raged above, not violent, but mournful, the sky weeping slow, heavy tears that shimmered as they fell. And she was there, standing beside him, her pale dress moving in the wind. "You shouldn't have followed the song," she said softly. "The sea remembers kindness and cruelty the same way, by keeping them forever." Elias looked around. The world felt weightless, suspended between dream and drowning. The waves rose and fell in slow motion. Each drop of water glowed faintly, like tiny memories of light. "What is this place?" he asked. She turned toward him. "This is where we wait, between remembering and forgetting." He felt a pull in his chest, deep and heavy. The tide's hum vibrated in his bones, and memories that weren't his began to surface, fragments of a life once lived through her eyes. He saw a cottage by the sea. He saw her younger self, laughing, her hands coated in candle wax, making small lights to hang in the window. He saw a man, the soldier, walking away down the pier, turning once to wave before the fog swallowed him. And then, the storm. The crash of thunder. The candles still burning in the window as the tide rose too high, too fast. When he blinked, he was back in the room. The mirror trembled. His reflection was his again, but not quite. His eyes looked different. Paler, like hers. He took a step back, but his reflection did not. It remained, still and watching, a faint shimmer passing through its features. Elias felt the room breathe, the boards under his feet shifting slightly, the air thick with the scent of salt and roses. The candle beside the mirror burned lower, its wax dripping like slow tears. That night, he dreamed of her again. In the dream, she stood at the edge of the ocean, holding the candle that would never die. Her face was calm, but her eyes begged for release. He reached out to her, and this time, she smiled. "You're closer now," she whispered. "Every reflection leads back to me." He awoke before dawn, heart pounding softly, the sound of waves still echoing inside him. He looked toward the mirror and saw 2 candles burning, though he had lit only one. The second candle burned inside the reflection, and standing beside it, faint and graceful, was the woman, waiting. The next morning, the sea was calm, too calm. The fog hung still, unmoving, like a curtain drawn across the world. Elias sat by the window of his small room, staring at the horizon where water met sky. Both were the same color, a pale, endless gray. The mirror still stood beside the bed, cracked slightly at the corner from the night before. But the crack did not look random. It curved like a coastline. Inside that reflection, the water shimmered faintly, as if something beneath its surface was alive, waiting. He had not slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the woman, standing just below the water's surface, her candle still burning beside her. The image didn't frighten him anymore. It called to him. By mid-afternoon, he could no longer resist. He left the inn, letters tucked under his coat, and followed the path down to the beach. The tide was low, revealing long stretches of black sand glistening with tiny shards of glass and seashells. The fog wrapped around him in soft waves, muffling the sound of everything except his own footsteps. Far out across the water, something glowed faintly, a warm light, flickering like a candle. At first, Elias thought it was a trick of the sun breaking through fog, but the light pulsed steadily, rhythmically. Each pulse matched the beating of his heart. He waded into the shallow surf. The water was cold but strangely welcoming, curling around his ankles like familiar hands. Each step drew him closer to the light, and each breath felt heavier, filled with salt and the scent of old wood. When he reached waist deep, the world shifted. The sound of waves fell silent. The wind stopped. He felt as though he had stepped through an invisible veil, and when he looked down, the reflection of the sky was gone. The water no longer mirrored anything. It showed beneath, and beneath there was a house, a wooden structure, half-rotted, resting in the stillness of the sea floor. Its windows glowed faintly with candlelight, and its roof swayed with the movement of unseen currents. The same shape he had seen in his dreams. The same house where she waited. Without realizing, Elias took another step and sank. The water accepted him easily, not with violence, but with softness, like a blanket wrapping around him. He did not choke or struggle. The sea moved aside, letting him descend slowly, quietly, until his boots touched the floor. Everything was silent. The house stood before him, a ghostly reflection of the candle house he had once heard of in stories, but darker, older, submerged in time. Its door swayed gently, creaking with each invisible current. He approached it, each motion slow, dreamlike. When he reached out to push the door, it opened on its own. Inside, candles floated midair, burning beneath the water without smoke or heat. The furniture was untouched by decay, though everything shimmered as if viewed through glass. And there, in the center of the room, was her. The woman stood beside a table, her dress flowing like drifting seaweed. The same calm expression, the same eyes pale as moonlight through mist. "You came," she said, her voice not muffled by the water. "I knew you would." Elias tried to speak, but no sound came. Only small bubbles of breath escaped his lips, rising and vanishing before they reached the ceiling. She smiled faintly, tilting her head. "You don't need words here. The sea already knows what you feel." He stepped closer, watching her. There was no fear left in him now, only a strange, aching recognition. She reached out her hand, and for the first time, he noticed the faint shimmer of light beneath her skin, as though she was made of the same water that surrounded them. When their fingers touched, Elias felt warmth, a pulse of memory flooding through him. Suddenly, he saw flashes again, a candle in a storm, a man drowning, a woman screaming into the wind, a promise made to something vast and eternal. He gasped, though no air filled his lungs. She asked the sea for mercy. A voice whispered in his mind, her voice, yet also the tides. But mercy always demands a price. He saw the truth then. She had begged the sea to return her lover's life. And the sea had listened. It had given him back, for one night only, before taking him forever. And in exchange, it had taken her soul, binding her to its depths, to the endless waiting between tides. She looked into his eyes, and he understood. She was not haunting him. She was choosing him. "You feel it now," she murmured. "The pull, the rhythm, the quiet between heartbeats. The sea has chosen you to remember." Elias shook his head, desperate, but the motion was slow, muted. "I'm not like you," he tried to say, though the words came as nothing but thought. Her expression softened. "Not yet." The house creaked. The candles flickered. Shadows of figures, others, began to appear beyond the windows. Faces, pale and sad, floating in the current. "They all came before you," she said. "Each of them heard the sea. Each carried the memory. You are only the next." Elias felt his chest tighten, his vision blur. The candlelight began to fade into darkness, and the sound of waves returned, louder now, like 1,000 whispers calling his name. He tried to turn, to flee, but the water thickened, holding him in place. The woman reached out again, pressing her hand gently against his chest. "Breathe," she whispered. And he did, but instead of air, he breathed water, and it felt like relief. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing on the shore. The fog had lifted slightly. The sea was calm, but his clothes were dry. His skin was cold, and the letters in his pocket were gone. The inn behind him looked the same, yet older, emptier, as though it had been abandoned for years. He turned toward the sea, and for a brief moment, beneath the rippling water, he saw the faint outline of the house, still glowing softly with candlelight. And standing in its window was him. The rain had stopped by morning, but the world still felt drenched in silence. Elias sat by the broken window of the sea house, watching the horizon blur between ocean and sky. The light was pale, like a dying candle in fog. Every sound, the faint dripping of water, the whisper of the wind, carried the weight of memory. He hadn't slept in what felt like days. Maybe he couldn't anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, the woman in the mist, the one who had led him to this place beneath the waves. Sometimes she looked young, her eyes soft and full of sorrow. Other times she looked as old as the sea itself, her face shifting like water around a forgotten shape. Last night, she had spoken again. Her voice wasn't a whisper this time. It was clearer, closer. "You promised," she said. "You promised you'd find me." Elias didn't remember making such a promise. But in his dreams, in the shadows of half-remembered visions, he did. He saw himself standing on this very shore, years ago, before the storm that erased his past. He remembered holding a letter, damp with sea spray, a letter written by someone who loved him deeply. But the words were gone now, washed away. He walked out to the beach as the tide receded. The fog moved lazily across the shore, revealing fragments of what the ocean had taken: a rusted bell, half-buried steps leading nowhere, and, glinting faintly in the wet sand, a small silver locket. When Elias opened it, the hinge creaked softly. Inside was a faded picture, a woman standing beside the sea, her eyes looking straight at him. And on the opposite side, etched into the metal, were 3 words: "Until the tide returns." The moment he read it, the world tilted. A wave of sound, low, mournful, endless, filled his ears. He saw flashes of memory not his own, a promise made long ago between 2 souls, one lost to the sea and one left behind. "Find me before the tide returns," the woman's voice echoed inside him, "or we both remain between worlds." That night, as darkness fell again, Elias lit a single candle in the window, just as the old man had done long ago. The flame flickered wildly against the glass, reflecting his face beside hers. For the first time, he saw it clearly. She wasn't haunting him. She was waiting for him. He whispered softly into the still air. "I remember now." Outside, the waves began to rise, shimmering like liquid silver beneath the moon. Somewhere beneath that restless surface, the forgotten promise stirred once more, ready to claim what it had been waiting for all along. And as the candlelight trembled, Elias felt something warm trail down his hand. Not water. Down his hand. Not water, not blood, but the touch of someone unseen, reminding him that love, like the sea, never truly lets go. The moon hung low that night, swollen, pale, and trembling above the horizon. Its reflection shimmered across the waves like a broken path of silver leading straight into the deep. Elias stood at the edge of the shore, his boots sinking into the cold sand. The candle he had lit earlier was still burning behind him, its flame bending with the wind but never dying, like a heart refusing to stop. The air smelled of salt, rain, and something faintly sweet, the same scent that always followed her. "You came back," the voice whispered, soft as the sea breeze. Elias turned. She was there again, The woman from the locket, the woman from the fog, standing barefoot in the water. The waves touched her feet, but never seemed to touch her. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, not cruel, not ghostly, just tired. I remembered, Elias said quietly. The promise. She smiled, not the kind that belonged to the living, but the kind that had waited too long to exist. You said you'd find me before the tide returned. Elias nodded, his throat tight. And if I didn't? Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the fog and sea became one. Then the ocean keeps us both. The wind rose. Waves crashed closer. The moon began to sink, swallowed slowly by the black water. The sea itself seemed to breathe heavier with every heartbeat. Elias felt it pulling him, not violently, but gently, like a hand guiding him home. He looked back at the shore one last time. The candle still burned by the window of the sea house, its flames steady despite the storm. He could almost hear the old man's voice, distant, echoing. The tide always takes what it's owed. Elias stepped forward. The water was freezing at first, then strangely warm, like stepping into memory. The woman reached out her hand, her touch soft as mist. For a moment, everything, the pain, the searching, the sleepless nights, disappeared. And then silence. The ocean swallowed the light, and the candle finally went out. When dawn came, the village awoke to calm waters and a clear horizon. Fishermen found the shore empty. No footprints, no sign of the traveler who had come seeking stories of the sea. But inside the window of the abandoned house, a new candle stood, lit and steady. And beside it, in the faint reflection of the glass, two figures could be seen standing together beneath the moonlight, holding hands as the tide whispered softly against the rocks. Epilogue: The Legend of the Drowning Moon. They say if you visit that coast on a full moon, you'll see a faint glow beneath the waves, two shadows moving together where the sea meets the sky. Some say it's a curse. Others call it a love that refused to die. But the old ones, they call it the drowning moon. The night when promises made in life are finally kept in the depths. And if you listen closely to the wind, you can still hear their voices whispering through the tide. Calm, eternal, sleepless.